What is the Gullet? What is its strategic importance in House of the Dragon, and why was the Battle of the Gullet so terrible for both sides? A simple question begets a simple answer. The Gullet is simply the area between the two islands of Dragonstone and Driftmark and the peninsula of Massey's Hook, acting as a chokehold between the Greater Narrow Sea and Blackwater Bay, which houses the ports of King's Landing and Duskendale. Which means for trade, fishing, and armies, or really anything else from across the Narrow Sea, to make it by ship from or to King's Landing requires passage through the Gullet. Which means if you wanted to cut off King's Landing from receiving naval support or food and supplies from the sea, the Gullet is where you would place your ships. This is exactly what Lord Corlys Velaryon the Sea Snake does at the onset of the Dance of the Dragons. And we can see this in Season 1, Episode 10 of House of the Dragon, when Lord Corlys urges Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen that the Velaryon fleet might further seal the Gullet to hinder trade to and from King's Landing. This confers upon the Blacks two major advantages. One is that it stops their rivals in King's Landing from leaving Westeros to hide or seek aid in Essos, but it also prevents their naval forces from the Lannisters, who are allied with the Greens, or the Greyjoys, who may be convinced into aiding the Greens, from accessing King's Landing to either attack or defend the city from the Velaryon fleet. The same logic also stands for the Triarchy, but as you can see in Season 3, Episode 1 of House of the Dragon, the expected attackers were the Lannisters and or the Greyjoys, not the Triarchy. Though it should be said, the Triarchy was realistically the only naval fleet that could have approached the Velaryons, as the forces of both the Lannisters and the Greyjoys would have had to take passage through the Stepstones to get to the Gullet, which we know Corlys Velaryon had control of at this time. In fact, in Season 1, Episode 10 of House of the Dragon, he claims to have left a garrison to protect the passage as a consequence of his near demise. However, while the blockading of the Gullet conferred to the Blacks a major advantage, the Velaryon blockade also dealt the Greens a serious blow. This meant that all trade to King's Landing was effectively halted, leaving the city's small folk hungry and desperate. Not ideal conditions for your capital city. Therefore, Sir Otto Hightower in the books, Aemon takes this role in the show, decided to make an alliance with the Triarchy, the sworn enemies of Corlys Velaryon, and offer them the Stepstones, which Corlys currently possesses, in exchange for breaking the Velaryon fleet's stranglehold on King's Landing. This plan eventually bears fruit, and in 130 AC, the Battle of the Gullet takes place. This was, and still is, among the most bloody sea battles in all of George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire writings. Under the command of Admiral Shirako Lohar, the Triarchy sailed with 90 warships, which are divided into two squadrons, one entering the Gullet to the north of Dragonstone and one entering to the south. The attack happened at sunrise from the east, which obscured the Triarchy's coming to the Velaryon fleet. This was a vicious attack by the Triarchy, demanding the presence of the Black's dragon riders. The first to arrive was Prince Jacaerys on Vermax, who it is said swept down upon a line of Lyseni galleys. However, it's important to recall that these were the same hardened warriors who fought Prince Daemon and Caraxes for control of the Stepstones many years earlier. In other words, they have experience fighting dragons. Armed with spears, arrows, scorpion bolts, and grapnels meant to drag the young dragon whose scales were still soft and easily penetrated down to the depths of the sea. All this and more were launched at Prince Jacaerys Velaryon on Vermax. He dodged what he needed to, but for the most part stayed too high for their weapons to reach him or Vermax, and managed to set many Lyseni galleys aflame, one after another. And if he had stayed at a similar height, he and his dragon may have even survived this battle, emerged victorious, and who knows, Jacaerys may have even inherited the Iron Throne after his mother and become a Targaryen king on the levels of Aegon the Conqueror or his great-grandfather and almost namesake Jaehaerys the Conciliator. But at a certain point, he flew too low. We don't know exactly what the lethal strike was in the books. Some say it was an arrow to the eye or a grapnel that dragged the young dragon down. However, in Season 3, Episode 1 of House of the Dragon, we can very clearly see that it was a scorpion bolt fired into the side of Vermax, whose end was attached to a grapnel, the weight of which was more than the dragon could bear, that dragged the great fiery beast into the cold depths of the sea. Prince Jacaerys managed to free himself from his dragon's corpse, but was immediately struck down by Myroni's crossbowmen, thus ending the lives and stories of Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen's 15-year-old eldest son, the heir to the Iron Throne, and his olive green dragon. In the books, Sheepstealer is, of course, ridden by Nettles, who also participates in the battle. So do Adam on Seasmoke, Hugh on Vermithor, and Ulf on Silverwing. However, looking at the trailers for the next episode and the occurrence of Alice Rivers telling the Dragon Seas to get on going to the battle in the episode, it seems that they may yet arrive at the battle in time to actually put an end to it. There is, of course, a whole other aspect to the battle, of course, that involves Aegon and Viserys the Younger, but in case that happens in episode 2 or later in the season, I won't spoil it here. Interestingly enough, though, even though Alan does manage to kill Admiral Shiraka Lohar in the episode, they actually survive in the books and make it back across the Narrow Sea, though what they get up to is a plot point that can easily be taken up by some other random character or maybe even cut entirely, so I can understand why the show made this change. However, even though the episode does, the battle itself does not end with the death of Jace and Vermax. The battle apparently continues into the nighttime of the day, and the southern squad of the Triarchy ships assaults Driftmark, setting the harbor of Spicetown aflame and sacking the town and the castle of High Tide in the process, destroying all the great treasures of Corlys Velaryon and his Hall of Nine. The end result was that many thousands died in the battle, with the port of Spicetown never to be rebuilt. The Triarchy in total lost 62 of its 90 warships, roughly 2/3 of the fleet, whereas the Velaryons, and therefore the Blacks, lost Prince Jace Velaryon, his dragon Vermax, and 33% of the Velaryon fleet. There is of course the obvious question after a battle, which is who exactly won the Battle of the Gullet? This is not a simple answer, as you might expect from battles such as the Blackwater or the assault of the Wildlings on Castle Black in the main series. No, this is an extremely complex situation in which, much like Rook's Rest, both sides took heavy losses. The wiki interprets the battle as a tactical victory for the Greens, since they managed to eliminate Queen Rhaenyra's heir, Prince Jacaerys, and his dragon Vermax without losing any of their own forces and paying for the attack in the step zones which the Greens did not have possession of. However, the wiki also contends that it was a strategic win for the Blacks, since the Greens' main objective was to break the stranglehold of the Velaryon fleet on King's Landing, and by that measure, they did not succeed, as the Velaryon fleet, still at 66% capacity, was able to maintain its blockade on the city. Ultimately, I personally think that asking questions like who won the battle misses the point of what George R. R. Martin tries to impart on us through these writings, which you can see in the deaths of Prince Jacaerys and Vermax, the sacking of Spicetown, and the thousands of others on both sides who died during the battle, which is that the battle itself was wasteful, unnecessary, and completely avoidable. The problem isn't that the Velaryon fleet is blockading King's Landing, or that the Triarchy is coming to break that blockade, or that the Triarchy came with dragon-piercing scorpions attached to heavy grapnels. The problem isn't that the Dragon Seas arrived too late, or that Baela was too far away to save Jace, or that Sheepskeeler caused Vermax to fly too low. The problem is that this battle, and by extension this war, is happening in the first place. There's actually a very interesting quote by Corlys Velaryon in the books, as a response to this battle, that I hope we'll get to see in Season 3, Episode 2 of House of the Dragon, which I think summarizes it far better than I ever could, which is simply that if this be victory, I pray I never win another. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please do leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below. Also feel free to leave a comment telling me exactly how I misinterpreted the message of the Battle of the Gullet, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good day, everyone.